Welcome back to Malaysia Money Matters. It's November 28th, 2024. Today we're going to do a deep dive into some Malaysian company news,
Yes.
some global political updates that could impact our market.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix right now. On the one hand, you've got the U.S. economy. It's showing some real resilience with strong growth, despite the inflation and high interest rates.
That's got to be a good sign for the global economy as a whole.
Yeah,
And a stable global economy is generally good news for Malaysia, right?
absolutely. When the global economy is doing well, there's usually more demand for our exports and more investment flowing into our markets.
Hmm.
But, there are some dark clouds on the horizon.
Ooh.
Yeah, and one of the biggest, I think, is the return of Donald Trump to the White House.
Ah, yeah, his proposed trade policies, those tariffs on imports from countries like Canada, Mexico, and China, those have a lot of people worried.
With good reason. I mean, if he follows through with these policies, it could lead to a trade war, which could really hurt global economic growth. That would have a ripple effect on Malaysia. We rely so heavily on exports.
Right. Yeah. So it's a bit of a seesaw situation, some positive economic signs, but also some potential risks.
Exactly. It's more important now than ever to stay informed and, understand what's happening both globally and locally.
For sure. Speaking of locally, there's some news coming out from analysts over at Franklin Templeton. They're predicting a stable and potentially positive outlook for the Malaysian stock market in 2025.
Yeah, they're pointing to things like strong investment coming into Malaysia and the government's efforts to manage our finances responsibly.
Sounds promising. Should we be feeling optimistic then?
Cautiously optimistic, I'd say.
Yeah.
The strong U.S. dollar could pose a challenge for us, and the global economic situation is still a bit uncertain. We need to keep a close eye on those factors.
Okay, so a healthy dose of cautious optimism it is. So let's zoom in now on some specific Malaysian company news. We've got a real mixed bag today: IPOs, earnings reports, and even some strategic shakeups. First up, let's talk about CropMate. They're a fertilizer company that just went public.
Huge success for them. Their IPO was oversubscribed almost 85 times. That means investors were really eager to get a piece of the action.
85 times. Wow, that's a lot. What does that tell us about CropMate and the fertilizer industry in general?
It indicates a lot of confidence in CropMate's potential for growth. It also suggests that investors see the fertilizer industry as a good bet, maybe because of the increasing global demand for food.
Interesting. Positive sign for CropMate and the sector as a whole. Now, not all companies are having such a smooth ride. And Amatron, a tech company, saw their earnings drop this quarter.
Yeah, they were hit hard by fluctuations in the exchange rate between the ringgit and the US dollar.
Yes, the ever-volatile exchange rate. How does that impact companies like Amatron?
When the ringgit weakens against the US dollar, it makes it more expensive for companies like Amatron, which do a lot of business internationally, to import materials and pay for things in US dollars. This can really eat into their profits.
It's a good reminder that those global factors can really have a big impact on Malaysian companies. Now, let's move on to a brighter spot. FGV Holdings, Malaysia's biggest palm oil producer, saw their profits practically triple in the third quarter.
That's right. They benefited from higher palm oil prices and increased production.
Why have palm oil prices been rising?
Well, there's a few factors at play. Increasing crude oil prices have an impact, and there are also some concerns about lower palm oil production in some parts of the world.
So supply and demand at work. Now let's talk about BHIC, a company that's made a pretty significant strategic move. They decided to sell their stake in a former subcontractor for the troubled LCS project.
They sold a majority stake in Contrav's advanced devices to Rheinmetall. That was their joint venture partner. Resulted in a loss for BHIC, but it allowed them to distance themselves from the LCS project. That whole thing's been facing a lot of challenges.
So a strategic retreat to focus on other, more promising opportunities.
Precisely. It seems like they're trying to move away from the shipbuilding business and just concentrate on other areas like defense and commercial projects.
Interesting. It shows that companies are really having to adapt to changing circumstances and make tough decisions. And finally, we have Catcha Digital, which had some impressive earnings this quarter. They're planning to keep the momentum going through organic growth and, get this, mergers and acquisitions.
They're looking at acquiring other companies to accelerate their growth. It's a pretty common strategy in the business world these days.
It's certainly an ambitious approach. Now, let's shift gears a little bit from the business world and take a look at the Malaysian legal and political landscape. Things have been quite dramatic in the courtroom lately, especially with the High Court's decision in Dr. Seri Najib Razak and Tan Sri Modarwan Sergar Abdullah's case. The one related to that sovereign wealth fund called IPIC.
Yeah, the court granted them a discharge not amounting to an acquittal, or DNAA. Essentially, this means the charges against them have been dropped for now, but they could be brought back to court in the future.
And this decision was made because.
The prosecution failed to provide crucial documents to the defense, even though charges were filed way back in 2018.
So a procedural issue led to this outcome, but let's not forget the context here. We're talking about charges of misusing over RM 6.6 billion in government funds.
That's right. Funds that were supposed to be used for development projects allegedly diverted to IPI. That's a massive amount of money.
A reminder that corporate governance and accountability are still crucial issues in Malaysia. Moving on, we had another legal battle unfold with the suspension of the CEO of TMC Life Sciences, a healthcare company.
Yeah, Wan Nadia Wan Mode Abdullah Yaakob was suspended amidst accusations of wrongdoing.
What are the accusations against her?
Well, there's 5 specific allegations. They involve decisions she made regarding contracts with major insurance companies and a tech firm.
And how has she responded to these accusations?
Well, she's denying any wrongdoing, claims that all of her actions were in the best interest of the company. She's also saying that she didn't act alone and that her decisions were subject to the approval of the company's board.
So, a he said, she said situation. We'll have to see how this legal battle plays out. Now, let's turn to the political arena. There's been a new development in the sedition trial of former Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin.
His trial has been moved from the Guamasang Sessions Court to the Kuala Lumpur High Court.
And why the change of venue?
Well, it's because the case involves some complex legal issues and has garnered a lot of public attention.
And remind us, what are the charges against him?
He's facing sedition charges for remarks he made during a recent election campaign.
So his words have landed him in hot water.
Yeah.
This case is certainly going to be closely watched.
Indeed. And with that, I think it's time for us to take a little breather and gather our thoughts.
Yes, we've covered a lot of ground already.
It has been quite a ride.
It has been. But before we jump back into the ups and downs of the market, I'm kind of curious about the energy sector. It's always such a hot topic here in Malaysia.
Rightfully so. And there's actually some good news on that front. Petronas Gas had a strong third quarter.
Oh, yeah, they're a key player in the industry.
They are, and they reported a 5.4% increase in profits compared to last year.
That's encouraging. What drove that growth?
A couple things. They saw an increase in revenue from their core business operations, and also they benefited from some favorable movements in the currency markets.
And that translates into good news for investors.
Definitely. Petronas Gas declared a dividend of 18 cents per share.
Nice little reward for those who have invested in the company.
It is.
So traditional energy sources like gas are still playing a vital role in our economy. But what about the transition to renewable energy? I know Malaysia has some ambitious goals when it comes to that.
We do. The government is pushing for a big increase in the production of hydrogen.
Now, hydrogen's seen as a clean and sustainable energy source.
It is.
What kind of impact could this have on Malaysia?
Well, if we can successfully scale up hydrogen production, it could help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and, it could also create new opportunities for businesses and investors.
So a win-win for the environment and the economy.
Exactly.
Speaking of sustainable solutions, I was reading about a company called Meta Bright Group. They're making some interesting moves.
Yeah, they partnered up with a grocery and retail operator called Tunis Manja to help them become more energy efficient.
How are they doing that?
Well, Meta Bright Group is installing solar panels on all the rooftops of Tunis Manja's buildings. This will allow them to generate their own electricity from the sun, so, they can reduce their reliance on the grid, lower their energy costs.
It's good to see companies taking those practical steps towards sustainability.
Yeah, it is.
Now let's zoom back out to the broader corporate landscape. What other company news caught your attention?
Well, Banastra Corp, they're a construction company, landed a major contract worth RM 68 million.
Oh, wow. What kind of project is it?
They're going to redevelop a sewage treatment plant in Kuala Lumpur.
Okay.
It's a big project and should keep them busy for the next 3 years.
Infrastructure projects like that, are always a good sign for the construction sector.
Yeah.
What about other companies in the building and materials space?
We have Chinhin Group. They're involved in building materials and property development. They reported outstanding earnings for the third quarter.
Really?
Yeah, their net profit more than doubled compared to last year.
That's impressive. What drove that growth?
Their acquisition of new companies played a significant role in boosting their profits, and they seem to be on a roll they're anticipating continued growth.
I can't resist talking about food.
Yeah.
Especially poultry. It's a staple in the Malaysian diet, and it seems like CCK Consolidated Holdings, a poultry company, is doing quite well.
They are. They've been getting a lot of positive attention from analysts who are expecting strong earnings from them in the coming months, with the holiday season coming up.
Yeah.
Demand for poultry is likely to increase.
So, a good time to be in the poultry business.
Mhm.
Now, let's talk about a company that's venturing into a slightly different consumer space: air fresheners.
Vanzo Holdings is an air freshen maker, and they're getting ready to list on the ACE market in December.
Interesting. What's their strategy for success?
They're planning to introduce new products regularly, and they're actively seeking collaborations with other companies to expand their reach.
Okay.
They've already worked with big names like Disney and Warner Bros.
That's impressive for a relatively new company.
It is. Seems like they have a good grasp of branding and marketing.
So far, we've seen companies adapting and innovating in all sorts of sectors. It really speaks to the dynamism of the Malaysian market.
It does, and there's more. The banking sector has also seen some intriguing developments.
Okay, I'm all ears what's been happening.
A FinBank has a new majority shareholder, the Sarawak state government.
Really?
They acquired a large stake in the bank. This makes them the first state government in Malaysia to hold a majority stake in a banking institution.
That's a bold move by the Sarawak government. What are the implications of this?
It's still early days,
Yeah.
but it could potentially lead to more investment and economic development in Sarawak.
In areas that align with the state government's priorities.
Exactly.
It's a development that could really reshape the financial landscape in Sarawak.
It could.
Now let's shift gears to an issue that's always close to the hearts of Malaysians: affordable housing,
It's a challenge.
especially for, those just starting out or on lower incomes.
Well, there's some good news on that front. The Prime Minister is set to announce a big affordable housing project next month.
What's the scale of the project?
It's a massive RM 13 billion investment, largest ever in the country's history for an affordable housing project.
That's a pretty significant commitment from the government.
It shows their dedication to addressing the housing needs of the people, particularly civil servants, many of whom are still finding it hard to own homes.
It's a step towards, creating a more equitable society.
Yeah.
Now let's turn to a legal case that's generating quite a buzz.
8 individuals have filed a class action lawsuit seeking RM 60 million in damages. They're suing a number of parties, including the World Health Organization, Pfizer, Sinovac, and even former and current prime ministers.
Wow, that's a wide range of defendants.
Right.
What's the basis of their lawsuit?
Their claim stems from the COVID-19 vaccination program, the one that was made mandatory.
Right.
They allege that they suffered adverse effects from the vaccines.
I see. They're also seeking a declaration from the court that COVID-19 was a fake pandemic.
It's a controversial case, raising questions about vaccine safety, government mandates, and even the very nature of the pandemic itself.
How do you think the courts are going to handle this? It touches on some pretty sensitive issues.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Now back to policy and infrastructure.
Yeah.
We have some positive developments in the electric vehicle EV sector.
Okay.
That's an area where Malaysia's been making some progress, albeit slowly.
Right. One of the challenges has been the lack of charging stations.
Yeah, that's been discouraging people from switching to electric vehicles.
But the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry is working to address this.
What are they doing?
They've teamed up with the governments of Selangor and Johor to make sure that every district in these states has at least one DC fast charger for EVs.
That's a good move. Hopefully this will boost the adoption of EVs in Malaysia.
I think so.
Before we move on, I'm curious to know which news story you're most eager to follow in the coming weeks.
For me, it's got to be the affordable housing project.
Oh, yeah.
An investment of RM 13 billion is just substantial,
Yeah.
I'm really keen to see how this project unfolds and what impact it'll have on homeownership rates in Malaysia.
I agree. That's a story with some far-reaching implications. Personally, I'm intrigued by that whole effing bank thing. A state government becoming the majority shareholder in a bank.
Right.
It's unprecedented in Malaysia.
It's going to be interesting.
It will, and that's the beauty of the Malaysian market.
Yeah.
There's always something happening, something to analyze, something to discuss.
That's for sure.
It certainly keeps us on our toes. Now, we have just a few more stories to cover before we wrap up today's deep dive. Let's get to it.
It does keep us on our toes. And speaking of keeping things interesting, there's been a development in the case of Maria Chinabdilla, the former MP and activist.
I think I remember her. She was pretty vocal.
She was. She's been involved in a legal battle stemming from an article she wrote that was critical of the Sharia court. The High Court initially granted her permission to challenge a contempt of court charge, but the Court of Appeal overturned that decision.
So not a good outcome for her.
Seems like a setback. The Sharia court had issued a show cause order against her, basically demanding an explanation for her actions.
Okay.
Her article questioned their proceedings, specifically in a case involving the ex-wife of a prominent businessman.
I vaguely remember that case. It involved the ex-wife of the Nazagrove's executive chairman, right?
Yes.
She was given a custodial sentence for not complying with visitation rights.
Right.
And Maria Chin's article criticized that decision.
Exactly. And now with the Court of Appeals ruling, she's facing a potential 7-day jail sentence.
It's a reminder that freedom of speech, while important, isn't absolute, especially when it comes to commenting on court proceedings.
It's a complex issue.
It is. Now let's shift our attention to the overall business outlook in Malaysia. What's the current sentiment?
Well, the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, or MIRE as it's known, is painting a positive picture. Their Business Confidence Index indicates that businesses are feeling optimistic about the fourth quarter of 2024.
It's good to hear what's driving that positive outlook.
A few things. Businesses are reporting stable production and sales.
Okay.
Employment levels seem to be improving, and investments are on the rise.
That's great.
Companies are also indicating that they're using their resources more efficiently.
So an overall sense of stability and growth in the business environment, that's got to bode well for the economy as a whole.
I think so.
Now, before we wrap up, I understand there's one more story we need to touch on. It involves a case that raises some concerns about corporate governance.
Yes, it involves Datuk Raymond Yap Wee Hin, the former deputy chairman of Patimus Computers.
What happened?
The Court of Appeal upheld his conviction for insider trading.
Oh, wow.
He was found guilty of selling a large number of Patimus shares while possessing confidential information about the company's financial troubles.
So he basically profited from information that wasn't public. A clear violation of market rules.
It is, and the court's decision sends a strong message that insider trading will not be tolerated.
It's a reminder that ethical behavior is just so important in the business world.
It is.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From economic indicators and company performance to legal battles and political developments.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been. So to wrap things up, what were some of the most impactful news stories for you today?
Well, for me, the announcement of that RM13 billion affordable housing project really stands out.
Yeah.
It's a sign that the government is serious about addressing those housing needs.
It is a lot of money.
It is. And, I'm also interested to see how that whole thing with F&B Bank unfolds with the Sarawak state government being the majority shareholder.
It's definitely a new development.
It is.
I agree. Those are some stories with the potential to really reshape the market. And for me, that insider trading conviction and the Maria Chin Abdullah case serve as good reminders that ethics and freedom of speech are things we need to think carefully about.
They are important issues.
They are. And that's really where Malaysia Money Matters comes in. We try to break down the latest news and help you understand what it all means.
We do.
So if you're looking for insightful analysis and, engaging discussions on the Malaysian market, be sure to subscribe to Malaysia Money Matters.
We'll guide you through everything.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Malaysian market. We'll be back soon with more insights and analysis. Until then, happy investing. Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you would like a deeper dive into all the investment opportunities from today's news, subscribe to my newsletter at moneymatters.substack.com. I will be sharing a deeper analysis of the key investment opportunities from today's news, including what makes these opportunities stand out and how they fit into the broader market trends. By subscribing to the Malaysia Money Matters newsletter, you will also get exclusive insights on my watch list and portfolio and fundamental reports on Malaysian listed companies.